G'day, it's Christine here from ChrisW Designs, and in this video I'm going to be sewing the quick no-zip crossbody bag on this machine. For this video I'm going to show you how to make the quick no-zip crossbody bag. The quick no-zip crossbody bag has the option of either a thumb lock or a magnetic snap, or you could even add a twist lock if you really wanted to. I'm going to show you in this video how to make this one with the magnetic snap version. The quick no-zip crossbody bag whips up really quickly using only a small amount of fabric and hardware, and it's also a great scrap buster because there isn't a lot of big pieces in this other than maybe the strap, but you can also use webbing for that, make it even faster. A testament to how fast this bag actually sews up is the fact that some of the testers made multiple versions, 2, 3. Why not? It's fun, it's quick, and it's easy. The flap is great for adding embellishments to. You could embroider it or do whatever you like there. Actually, have a look at some of the testers' versions. Several of them got very creative with their flaps. It's a great bag for beginners and advanced sewists alike. Even if you've sewed 100 bags, making these is so much fun. It's a little different because it has a quick access phone pocket at the back. If you've never sewn one of my quick access phone pockets before, now's a chance. They're great fun. I use mine all the time. I can't live without it. Makes it super easy to grab your phone, and it's kind of hidden. You know, people don't even know it's in there. At the front, under the flap, we have a key pocket, which you can see there, and inside the bag we have a card pocket, and that will hold multiple credit cards or other store cards. The quick no-zip crossbody bag makes up beautifully in a range of different fabrics. You can use all quilting cottons like this version here, or you can use a combination of quilting cottons and faux leather, or cork and fabric, or real leather and fabric, glitter vinyl, all sorts of things. If you're sewing on a domestic machine, I suggest, especially for your first one, you make it out of all quilting cottons, because that will be the easiest to sew and it's the least bulky. But if you want to add faux leather or cork, just make sure your faux leather is not one of the thick ones. This one is really nice and light, and it's very easy to sew. I had no issues sewing this on a domestic. This is the perfect bag to take out on a morning run or a quick dash to the shop. It's a great design for sew and sell because it whips up quickly and you don't need many materials and not much hardware, so it's an inexpensive bag to make, and they're a very popular size. I just want to say a big, huge thank you to all the testers and proofreaders who helped me with this pattern, because without you guys I wouldn't be able to put out a pattern which I can feel as confident as I do about this one, that it's all good. And yeah, thank you testers, you rock big time. Just remember, if you're having any problems at all with this pattern or any of my patterns, that we have our Facebook group, which is there for pattern support and fun and chit chat, and the link to that in the description below. Do pop along and join us because it's a lot of fun. Also have a newsletter which I put out regularly, which I include customer makes in it, and they are so much fun to see, and that'll give you a heap of inspiration as well. So I encourage you to join my newsletter. The link for that is in the description below. The quick no-zip crossbody bag. So now let's look at what we need for our quick no-zip crossbody bag. We need to cut a strap, an adjustable strap. I've cut 2 widths of my fabric here. That's because I'm going to join it. One width wasn't long enough, and I have already applied my interfacing to both of those pieces, and I will show you how I join those so that you don't get a bulky join. I will show that to you in the video. You need 2 strap tabs, 2 interfacing and 2 exterior, which I've already fused. You'll need phone pocket, 2 lining and 2 interfacing, and also 1 fleece. Only 1 fleece because it's only a small bag, so we don't really want too much fleece in there. It just gets too bulky, but so one is enough. And I've already fused that, as you can see. Key pocket, we need 2 lining and 2 interfacing, which I've fused. The body center, you need 2 exterior, this is where I put my patterned fabric, and 2 interfacing. Of course you can mix up your fabrics any way you wish, but we'll go with how I've done mine so that you can see what goes where. We need a top body, 2 exterior and 2 interfacing. This is why I've put plain coloured fabric. Faux leathers and vinyls work really nice in this area. You need 2 exterior, 2 interfacing and 2 fleece, and as you can see I've applied my interfacing and fleece already. A body bottom, 2 exterior and 2 interfacing. Again, this is where I've put my plain, and that's it there. The interfacing for the body we will apply during construction, so I have not applied that yet. You need 2 of those. That's them there. For the flap you need 1 exterior, 1 interfacing. I'll try again. For the flap you need 1 exterior, 1 lining and 2 interfacing, which I've already applied there. That's where I've used my plain fabric again. So for the body lining you need 2 lining and 2 interfacing, and as you can see I've already fused that. Your card pockets, now we need to cut 2 lining from the lining pattern piece and then 2 interfacings, which we center and fuse like that. We're just keeping the bulk out of the seams so that it doesn't get too thick when attaching it. It doesn't look real good if it's too thick. And your base stabilizer. I haven't done that yet, so I just thought I'd show you. It's the Decaville Heavy and the interfacing, and what you just need to do is wrap your interfacing around that, centering your Decaville so it's in the middle. Eyeballing it is good enough, and just wrap your interfacing around that, and then you'll just fuse those 2 together, and then during assembly we will stitch that into our bottom corners to hold it in place. So that's what you need to do there, just fuse that. You also need to cut 1 flap stabilizer piece out of Decaville Light, and we will insert that into our flap during construction. So looking at the hardware that you will need for your quick no-zip crossbody bag, you need 2 rectangular rings, 19mm or 3/4 of an inch in width. The height isn't so much important. You'll need a slider, also 19mm, 3/4 of an inch wide. This is to fit your strap. If you change the width of your strap, say if you use webbing or something, you can just alter the size of the hardware to suit your webbing. I wouldn't recommend going any wider than 1 inch if you do change the size of your strap, just because it won't work very well with the depth of the bag. You'll need a lock of some sort. I'm going to put a magnetic snap in this one that I'm going to make today. A slimline magnetic snap, that's 18mm in size. And you can put a thumb lock if you prefer, and I've marked on the pattern piece the positioning for both of those so that you know where to put them. Rivets are optional. You can either use rivets if you want to add a bit extra bling and they don't scare you. If you don't want to add rivets, you can just stitch your strap in place with a rectangular box and a cross through it to make it secure. And if you want to add a label, you can add a label. And that's all we need for our quick no-zip crossbody bag. So now we're going to join our adjustable strap pieces, but before we do that we're going to cut the ends at an angle. Just use the lines on your cutting board if you have a cutting board. It just makes it so much easier to get the right angle. Slide that on there, line that up like that. So once we have cut one, we need to grab our other strap piece. Now we're going to put that's going to go right sides together, and we're going to be wanting to put it like that. So now we need to pin these two ends together. So because I'm going to do a 6mm 1/4 inch seam, I need to overhang the corner by about that much, so that when we stitch and then press our strap out, we're going to have our edges even. Like that, and now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch those edges together. So now we're going to stitch using our old vintage Janome, and we'll find out exactly how she performs, complete with its engraved numbers, which I don't know what they're for. And I also discovered that the markings on the needle plate here are incorrect. Where it says it's 3/8 of an inch, it's actually 1/4 of an inch, 6mm, and the 4/8 of an inch line is 1 centimetre or 3/8, so I don't know how they managed to do that, but yeah. My stitch length is 2.5. See, and when we open that out, our edges are lined up. So now we need to just go over to the ironing board and press that seam open. So now we need to press that seam open. I always like to press from both sides, like so. Cut these corners off like so. Now we need to make our strap. Do some pressing. Start by pressing in half lengthways, matching up those raw edges. Now, since I've used twice the width of my fabric, my strap's going to probably be way too long, so I will just measure it up and cut it to my required length. In the pattern, we've got the strap at 150 centimetres or 60 inches, but I'm very small, so I probably don't really need it quite that long. Now, once you have your strap pressed in the middle, you need to press in the side edges to almost meet at that centre crease. Now fold in half and press. So now at each end we need to open that out, fold the edges together like that, and then add a clip. Same with this end, we need to open that out, line up those edges, fold that over, clip, and we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch the ends. So now we're going to stitch across the end of our straps at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. So now we're just going to trim these ends back. I need to bring up my good scissors because these aren't much chop. Now we just need to open these back out so that we have a nice end. Blunt end of my scissors just to poke that out a bit. If you have a pointy scissors, I wouldn't do that. So now we're just going to repress that back together again. Now with the ends, I do recommend that you cover them and then give them a good whack with your hammer. That just thins out that end so it makes it easier to stitch. So sometimes when you have a big long strap like this and you don't have a walking foot, when you try and stitch it, the top layer is not going to match up with your bottom layer. So I like to use a bit of glue and glue base the strap together just to hold it while I'm sewing. And now we're going to go over to the machine and stitch our strap. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch or top stitch my strap. I'm going to use a stitch length of 3.5 and I'm going to stitch approximately 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the strap. Across the end and back down the other side. Once I've stitched my strap, I like to just give it another press. Now we'll set that aside because we will add our hardware to that at a later stage. So now we're going to do our strap tabs. Fold in half, press a crease. Do that on each one. On one end only, we need to open that out like that and then fold those edges back in or back over. Add a clip. Now we're only doing it to one end of the strap tab. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch those ends. Now I'm just going to trim these seams Now I like to wallop those ends a little bit with a hammer just to flatten them. Makes it easier to sew. So now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch these strap tabs. Starting at the raw end, 3mm 1/8 of an inch from the edge, stitch length of about 3.5. Retrieve your 2 rectangular rings and your strap tabs, and we're going to place the stitched end over through our tab. Take it through about an inch. Put a clip in there. Now you can either put a rivet in there to hold or stitch a rectangular box. Do the same with this one. Take it through about an inch or so. Now I'm going to add a rivet into each of these. First I'm going to punch my hole. There's my rivets. Now, you know you have the correct length rivet if when you compress the layers around the rivet, there is the little knobbly bit sticking out through the hole. If it's way out and you see part of the stem's too long, in which case you'll bend your rivet. If it's not poking out and all you can see is just the tip, then that's too short and you are likely to pop your rivet. So I'll just sit that there, and then I'll poke the other hole. I'm just eyeballing it. You can measure it if you prefer. Like that. And now we need to put this one back here. Now we need to set our rivet. Same with this one. Like that. Now we'll set those aside until later when we will attach them to our bag. retrieve your body centre and your body bottom pieces. And we will place each bottom piece right sides together with the body centre like this, and you can now either pin or clip depending on what you prefer to do. And if you're using faux leather or something similar for the bottom band, then you would use a clip or several clips. Now we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch those two bottom edges. Okay, so now that we have stitched that, we need to press these seams open. Like that. And now we need to retrieve our body fleece, and we're going to center this onto each of these and fuse into place. I'm going to get rid of all these hairs. This mat is shocking for leaving hairs on everything. Now, I like to use a pressing cloth, or this is a Teflon sheet, just over the top of that. There we go. So now what we need to do is go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch either side of that seam. So I'm going to top stitch with a stitch length of 3.5. I'm going to leave this thread in, coloured thread for this side, and then I'm going to change to a brown for the bottom. I'm going to top stitch approximately 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the seam line. This one. Now I'm just going to change to my brown thread. Like that. Now if you want to add a bag label to your bag, now's a good time to do that. I think I might actually put mine on my flap this time because I'm using a magnetic snap. So retrieve one of the body pieces, the one that's going to be your back, if there's a difference, and it's the one that's going to be your back. Now we'll need one of the phone pocket piece. We need the one without the fleece attached. So the one with the fleece we'll just set aside for now. And we need to mark the center by folding that in half. Like so. Now match that up. Stick in a couple of pins or clips. And we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch a 6mm 1/4 of an inch seam. Now we're going to stitch at a 6mm 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Normal stitch length of 2.5. On my Vanina it would be 2.4, but this doesn't have 2.4. Well, it might have, it's got little quicks in between, but it's halfway between the 2 and the 3, so that's 2.5. Now we need to press that upwards, and there's those hairs again. Does anyone else with these wool mats have problems with hairs? Drives me nuts. I don't know if it's just mine or if it's a common thing. Leave a comment in the section below if you have a hairy problem. Now we retrieve your top body pieces. Or body top pieces. Set the pattern aside. Now we need to place this right sides down on there, and we need to measure in 3.5 centimeters from each end. 1 3/8 of an inch. So we're going to stitch. First we'll clip. Actually, I might use a pin. A bit better. If you're using faux leather, obviously you do not pin. So now I'm just going to stitch normal stitch length to that point there. Then I'm going to lengthen the stitch to the longest basting stitch the machine will do. And then I'm going to baste that to there, and then I'm going to stitch normal length seam there, stitch length, so that I can later remove this basting stitches. But that will hold the pocket nice and even until it's done. Back stitching both ends here just to keep it secure. Now I'm lengthening my stitch to the longest length, which is 4 on this machine. Stitching back over to the other mark. Now I'm going to turn it back to my normal 2.5 stitch length. Back tap and stitch to the end like that. So now we need to flip this over and press this seam open. I always finger press it a little bit like this first, then grab the iron. Need to clean the bottom of my iron. I keep forgetting to do it. So now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on the bottom side only. top stitch length 3.5, top stitching on this bottom side only. Actually could stick a pin in there just to hold that phone pocket so it stays put. Grab your other phone pocket piece with the fleece attached. Now on the top right hand side, run a strip of double-sided tape. Now we're going to place that right sides together, aligned along the top edge of the top seam allowance there, and press to stick it down like that. Never mind my iron dirt on there. Now if that's not even down the bottom you can trim it, but that's pretty close there, so I'm not even going to bother. Now I'm going to put some double-sided tape here, because I'm going to press that up. You can just iron it up if you want to. Just going to stick a couple of pins in the side of my pocket to hold the layers in place. So I'll flip that over and then put some double-sided tape on this side. And now we want to make sure that those bottom edges are even. So this seam allowance was slightly bigger than the other one because I didn't trim it, but that's not going to matter in there. Like that. Go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch that top body panels just above the seams by 3mm 1/8 of an inch. That will fasten your other phone pocket piece to the body, and then we will stitch the two sides of the phone pocket, but we will flip that body out of the way upwards and then stitch to do that. Just going to put my brown thread back on again. Now since I stitched probably a little bit closer than 3mm 1/8 of an inch last time, I'm going to stitch similar to how I did last time so it looks even. 3.5 stitch length. Now we need to flip this pocket up. And stitch these two sides. Seam allowance of 1 cm 3/8 of an inch. Try not to stitch into the top edges of that pocket body. Over. This side now. I'm used to my banana stopping in the needle down position. There. Okay, so now I'm going to remove my basting stitches. Going to remove all these little thread ends. Stitch that. Now we need to mark either side of the opening of our pocket with a pen just between the rows of stitching. like that. And now if you're going to set a rivet, you can make another line 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch away from the first line on either side, or if you're not using a rivet, you can stitch it sort of 1/8 of an inch, 3 millimeters away from each line. But I'm going to add a rivet, so I'm going to make it 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch away. Like that. So the main thing about setting a rivet is you need to make sure you're not piercing any stitches. So you need to set it just below your seam line, and if you don't feel confident that you can't poke a hole in there or punch a hole in there without piercing any stitches, then I suggest setting your rivet just below this topless stitching line on either side. You can also then just put your rows of stitching right next to each other. But yeah, either put it there or in there if you feel confident that you will not pierce any stitches. Now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch each of those lines between the two top stitching rows. Okay, so I'm going to stitch my vertical lines in between my top stitching. I'm going to back stitch several times, and I'm just using my normal top stitching length of 3.5, and I think it's important that you do back tack so that you make the stitches quite secure. Like that. So now I am going to grab my hole punch. I'm just going to mark exactly where I want to poke my rivet. I have a very small hole punch, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to pierce my stitches. Line it up carefully. All good. Let's put in your rivet. Now have a look at the back of your work. If there's too much rivet poking out, if there's more than that knobbly bit, I recommend you pad that up with a little bit of stabilizer. Just a little bit of Decaville Heavy or foam. However much extra thickness you feel that you need there. Actually, that's probably a little bit too big. I don't need it quite that big. Just pop that there. That's looking good. Put a rivet on top. I'm going to do the same over this side. Adding a rivet. Put that through the hole. Add a little bit of Decaville if needed. And a cap. So this cap size is really important. You do not want to go any smaller than 9mm caps, because otherwise they are too small and they won't give it the support. If you're unsure about piercing those stitches when you punch your hole, I would move the rivet down below your top stitching and set it there instead. It can be just below the top stitching, so it still looks good, and it will still give your pocket the support that it needs, along with your 2 rows of stitching. Now I better set those rivets before I forget. Like so. Now I just will point out that it's very important that when you turn your bag right side out, that you'll be mindful of those rivets and do it very gently so you don't stress those rivets. And then I also want to point out, please do not try and turn this bag through that pocket, because that pocket is not big enough for this bag to turn through without causing major stress on these points here, and you'll end up with popped rivets, torn stitches. I have a different method of turning this bag to finish it, and that is through the lining, and we leave the bottom end of our lining open, and that's how we turn it. And then we finish off by stitching that lining shut by pulling that lining out through this pocket. You need to ease that out slowly without stressing on your rivets. And yeah, as long as you follow those steps, it'll be all good. So now we're going to make our front key pocket. The assembly is pretty much the same as the phone pocket that we just did, except that you will sew the bottom of your key pocket shut. So retrieve your front body assembly and let's get started. We just need one of our front key pocket pieces. There's no fleece on these, so just any one will do. And we'll put the other piece aside for now. And now we need to mark our halfway points. Like so. Right sides together and either pin or clip. And we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch across there using a 6mm 1/4 inch seam. Stitching with my normal stitch length of 2.5, 6mm or 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So now we need to press our key pocket away from our body, like that. Retrieve your body top and we'll place that right sides down on there, and we'll grab a ruler. We're going to measure and mark in 3.5 centimeters from either side. Mark right to the edges so that it's easy to see when I'm stitching, and that is 1 3/8 of an inch. Let's grab a couple of pins or clips and clip to hold, pin to hold, whichever. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch both those sides with our normal stitch length. And then this is going to be a longer basting stitch in the middle because we will remove that later. Normal stitch length of 2.5. Making sure to back stitch there and lengthen your stitch to the longest stitch length on your machine, and baste the rest of the pocket up to that mark. And then go back to your 2.5 or whatever stitch length you use usually and stitch the rest of this pocket. Like that. Now that we have stitched our front key pocket in place, we need to flip it over and we're going to press this seam open with our pocket downwards. That's out of the way. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on this bottom side. I'm just going to put a pin in there to hold that pocket, the key pocket, away so it doesn't flip up accidentally. So now I'm going to top stitch approximately 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the seam line using my top stitch length of 3.5. Now remove the pin, flip it back over, retrieve your other key pocket piece, and we'll run a strip of double-sided tape across the top on the right side. Line it up with the top of that seam allowance there, getting your side edges even. If you feel the need to trim your pockets level, you can do that now. Mine are pretty good, so I'm just going to leave them. Place a pin into each side, and now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch the top side of that seam line on the top body piece, and then we're going to stitch all the way around our pocket. Okay, so I'm just going to remove my green thread, blue thread. I'm going to pop in my brown thread. Making sure your pocket's out of the way. Now I'm just going to stitch approximately 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the seam line using my stitch length of 3.5. Now flipping this over, flipping that up, I'm going to stitch all the way around my pocket at my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Like that. I need to remove my pocket basting stitches. I'm just going to make a mark there so I can see where that is, and I'm going to put in a rivet. But if you're not using rivets, just stitch between the two top stitching lines. Like that. Now we need to add our magnetic snap for our body. First thing to do is pin or clip the pocket up out of the way. Now retrieving your body center pattern piece, we're going to use that to mark the position of our magnetic snap. So I'm just going to clip that on there to hold it in place. I'm just lining up that seam line with the seam line underneath. And now I need to mark, oh, that's not very straight, is it? Now I need to mark the placement. I'm just going to make some little holes in this so I can put my pen through it to mark my placement marks. like that. So if you're using a thumb lock, you would do the same thing. You mark your place, you line your pattern piece up and mark your thumb lock placement just by cutting those slits and marking the spot. And now that you've done that, we just need to make our holes right through there. And the slits for the magnetic snap. And now some fray stopper. Grabbing your fray stopper pen. Put a dab of fray stopper on there. Now I'll just put that. Now the female piece goes into the body. I didn't make those slits big enough. Make it look like hard work, don't I? Grab a piece of Decaville. This is Decaville Heavy, a bit bigger than your magnetic snap. Just mark some slits on that. Cut them slits and pop it over the top of your magnetic snap. Add your washer and then bend the prongs inwards. Some people like to bend them outwards, some people like to bend them inwards. That's entirely up to you. It's neither way is right nor wrong, but I'm just going to go and do this on a firm surface. If I do it here on the table, it will bounce all over the place like that. Now we need to cut some scraps of interfacing to pop over the back. Like that. Now if you were using your thumb lock, you would install the thumb lock that you installed your magnetic snap. Just make sure that you get the orientation of the thumb lock the right way. You don't want to install it upside down, so just make sure you get that right and put that on the back and you'll be all good. Now the other half of the thumb lock will get installed after your flap is finished. We'll just grab our flap pieces. We don't need the Decaville stabilizer at this point because we'll put that in a bit later. So now we need our lining piece because our magnetic snap goes into our lining. Just going to make these slits so I can mark my position. Over the magnetic snap, just make sure it's well out of your seam. Put the washer on the back and now hammer those inwards again. Yeah, a couple of scraps of interfacing. Now if you want to add a label to your flap to the exterior, you can do that now. Just decide on a placement. Okay, so now I have my label attached and my magnetic snap in place. Flat pieces right sides together, and we're going to pin all the way around. Now if you're not confident in your stitching ability in terms of keeping the correct seam allowance around curves, you can just draw that in. And now we shall go over to the sewing machine and stitch our flap. Our normal stitch length of 2.5. Now we're leaving this top open for turning. And now that we have stitched our flap, I like to press the seams open. Just gives a nicer finish when you turn it. Using pinking shears, I'm just going to trim all the way around. If you don't have pinking shears, then just use the scissors to notch into your curves. Now we're going to turn that right side out. Now we need to retrieve our flap stabilizer. Find the shiny side, the glue side, and we're going to put that into there with the glue side up towards our exterior. Like that, and I like to place the decaville so that it's on, so that the seam allowances are under the decaville towards the lining side. Now once you've got your decaville fused into place, just allow that to cool. I like to leave it for about 30 minutes or so it's really properly cooled before I start doing anything else. So if you were putting a thumb lock on here instead of using magnetic snap like I have, you would need to check that the thickness of your flap suits the space that you have in your thumb lock. In this case, the flap is too thin, so I would need to put a little bit of decaville or a bit of foam or something inside there, just down the bottom here, so that makes it a nice firm fit for the thumb lock. So you could start by putting one layer off. You'd need to cut it in the same shape as your flap so that it sits right down in there, and put a couple of pieces. You don't need to put a real big piece, just a little small piece down the bottom there in the area of the thumbnail. In the area of the thumb lock. I keep saying thumbnail. Put some decaville heavy in your flap. In the area of the thumb lock. So now we're going to stitch all the way around our flap using a stitch length of 3.5, and a seam allowance of 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch. I also like to baste the top edge of the flap closed, approximately 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, but that is not important because it does not get seen, so I've gone very wonky there, but that doesn't matter because that will be inside the bag. Now retrieve your back body piece, that's the one with the phone pocket attached, and we're just going to mark the center point by folding that in half, and same with the flap. Just need to find that halfway mark. Now we're going to align flap right side down onto, or exterior side down onto the right side of your body assembly, and pin or clip that into place. Now we will go over to the sewing machine and baste that on using a 6 millimeter 1/4 inch seam. Now we're just going to baste this flap in place using a 6 millimeter 1/4 inch seam. Now retrieve your front body piece, and we're going to put those two pieces right sides together and just align these seams so that they sit really spot on together. And I like to pin this because it holds it a little bit more securely than a clip, and do the same on the other side, on the bottom side. Pin the bottom edges. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch those two sides and this bottom edge. We're not going to stitch that cutout on either side there. Okay, so we're going to stitch our seams now with a stitch length of 2.5, normal seam allowance of 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch. Stitch across the bottom. Now that we have stitched our seams, we're going to press these seams open. Now I'm going to go over to the hard spot on my floor. I'm just going to grab a hammer and whack those open there, just to make that sit more open when the bag is finished. If I hammer them now, they'll sit better. So I'm just going to give them a few whacks with the hammer. There, as you can see, whacking them with the hammer will help it sort of sit open once the bag is done. So now we need to form our corners. So we just need to bring that together like that, match up those seams. You can put a pin in here or clip it, whatever you prefer, but I'm just going to pop a pin in there. Obviously if you've used faux leather on the base of your bag, you wouldn't be putting a pin in there. You need to do the same on this side. Just match up those seams. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch our corners. Now we're just going to stitch these corners using our normal stitch length of 2.5 or 2.5. Now retrieving our base stabilizer, interfacing and base stabilizer. That's the Decaville Heavy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fuse this into place. We're going to wrap the interfacing around the Decaville, center of the Decaville left to right like that. Just line up the edges and fuse everything into place. Look at my nice clean eye. And then once that's cooled, we just need to align those edges together and just center the Decaville so it's over the center point of that seam. Clip it to hold. Same on this side. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're just going to base that on or stitch that on within the seam allowance to keep that base support in place. Now we're just going to stitch approximately 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch from the edge of those corners and base stabilizer pieces, just to hold it all together. Now I'm just going to baste my strap tabs into place. Now I'm basting this in place approximately 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge of the body assembly, with approximately 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch of the strap tab hanging out past the edge of the body assembly. So retrieving your card pocket pieces, we'll sit the pattern pieces aside. Now our interfacing is already fused there. So what we need to do is we're going to press or use double-sided tape the bottom seam allowance upwards or under, like this. Just going to put a couple of clips up the top here, pins, just to hold that so that they stay nice and even while I get these bottom edges even. Another couple of pins or clips in, and now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around there, leaving these pressed sections open for turning. Now we're going to stitch our card pocket pieces together using a 1 centimeter seam allowance, normal stitch length of 2.5. Now that we have stitched our card pocket piece, I'm just going to trim these corners, and I'm just going to use my pinking shears around these curves, but you can clip into them instead if you do not have pinking shears. I do recommend pinking shears as a good investment to have though, because I use mine all the time. Now we need to turn that right sides out. And press. And now we need to go over to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch this curved edge with a 3mm 1/8 of an inch seam. Now I'm just going to top stitch this edge using a approximately 3mm 1/8 of an inch seam. Top stitch length is 3.5. Okay, so retrieve one of your body lining pieces and set the other one aside for now. We're just going to fold that in half and press a crease just so we can find the center of this body, like that. And we're going to do the same with our card pocket piece. Just want to find the center so we can align the center with that center of the pocket with the center of the body, and this point here needs to be 2 inches or 5 centimeters down from the top edge. So if I just lay that on there, bring that down, matching up these centers like that, and pin into place. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch the pocket in place using a 3mm 1/8 of an inch seam. And these hairs are driving me batty. Please tell me I'm not the only one with a hairy mat. Now I'm going to stitch my card pocket in place using a 3mm 1/8 of an inch seam, top stitch length of 3.5. And I'm going to back stitch a couple of times here at the top because it's a high stress point, and I don't want that to come apart later. Same at this end. I'm going to back stitch a few times so it doesn't come apart easily. Like that. Retrieve your second body lining piece now, and we're going to put those right sides together and pin or clip the two sides. We're leaving this bottom open. We're just going to be doing the two side edges only. Now we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch both those side edges, but leave this bottom open. Stitch length 2.5, 1 centimetre seam allowance, 3/8 of an inch. So now we need to press our side seams open. So retrieve your exterior, and now we're going to put that down into the lining. Now you can decide here whether you want your card pocket at the back of the bag or towards the front. I'm going to put it towards the back where the foam pocket is, and that's the side where the flap is at the moment. Just push that down inside there. We're just going to align these top edges, get those center seams lined up, side seams rather, align those side seams together and clip. With the seams open. Actually going to put a couple of pins there because it just hold it that little bit better. Just going to do this at the side. Same on this side. Just manipulate that around. Like that, all the way around your bag. And now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch around there. If you're worried about thicknesses, just give that area where the strap is a couple of whacks with a hammer. It shouldn't be too bad at this point. You might want to do that when we do the final top stitching though. It's going to stitch with a seam allowance of 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, normal stitch length of 2.5. It is more easy when you've got a free arm, I will admit. It's also easier when your needle stops in the down position. Just take your time, it's not a race. Oh, that's handy, isn't it? Left the pin behind. Now we're just going to add a few rows of extra stitching in the strap area just to give it some extra support. Now if you feel there are any wonky areas around the top there, you can stitch that seam again just to make sure you get that corrected. Now we're not going to cut those extra bits off, they stay there, and we're just going to turn our bag now. Just like that, so easy. Now we're just going to shove that down in there, like that. Now place your hand into the phone pocket, and we're just going to grab the bottom of our lining and pull that out, like that. Like so. And we're going to pin and stitch the bottom edges, and then we will do our corners. Like that. Now we're just going to stitch that seam. Okay, so now we're going to stitch our bottom seam using a 1 centimeter 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and our normal stitch length of 2.5. Okay, so now we're going to press this seam open down here. And we're just going to form our corners in the same way we did before, just matching up those two bottom seams and aligning the seams together and pinning to hold. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch those two. Now we're just going to stitch our two corners. 1 centimeter 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, normal stitch length of 2.4. Now we're just going to pop that back down inside there, back through our phone pocket. Straighten everything back out again. Push it down in here. Go back into the phone pocket and just make sure all your corners are poked out properly. And now push that down inside there. Make sure that key pocket's pushed down. Push down that phone pocket, but we'll have to pull that back out and stitch it closed later. But for now, what we're going to do is manipulate and roll our seam around the top here. Now if you've used fabric, you can just pin to hold the layers in the correct spot. Otherwise, if you've used faux leather in that spot, then just add clips to hold. You don't want to pin faux leather. I know it seems obvious, but sometimes you forget, and once you've got a hole in it, it's too late. So manipulate that down on the inside, you can feel it like that. Now we're going to go and give each side here a good whack with the hammer to flatten that, to make it easier to stitch. Now, because I've got two very different coloured fabrics, I'm going to put my blue colour on the top, and my bobbin colour I'm going to change to my brown thread. Now I'm going to change to my stitch length of 3.5 top stitch length, and I'm going to start in the middle at the back of the flap, and I'm stitching 6mm 1/4 of an inch from the seam line. Take your time to manipulate things around. Okay, so now we need to put the bottom edges of our phone pocket aligned together, and this is the second time I'm doing this because the first time my camera was out of focus for some reason. But anyway, you need to clip each of the corners like I've already done here. Like that. Now we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch those edges together. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this phone pocket closed using my 3.5 length stitch length. Now just inspect your seam to make sure that the edges have remained aligned and that you don't have a hole in the bottom of your pocket. So now there's two ways to attach our strap to our rectangular slider. We can either use a rivet, or we can stitch it on with using a rectangular box formation. So I'm going to stitch it on with a rectangular box. So I'm just going to draw my rectangular box on here. So I'm basically going to stitch over the existing top stitching there, and I'm going to draw an X in the middle like that, and then we'll grab our slider with the wrong side up, put that down in through there, up over the center bar, back over like that, and clip into place. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch that rectangular box. Okay, so to stitch my rectangular box I need my zipper foot. Now we need to move the needle over. Okay, so now just going to stitch this rectangular box, top stitch length of 3.5. Like that. So if you're wanting to attach your strap to your rectangular ring using a rectangular box formation, you need to draw that on the right side of your strap end now. But I'm going to be setting a rivet in mine, so I'm not going to do that. Finding the wrong side of your strap, we'll thread that through from left to right through the right hand side rectangular ring. Take that through this and then through the slider, up over the bar, like so. your rectangular box is sandwiched in the middle there. So if you didn't do a good job and it's a bit wonky, it's a bit hidden in there. And just pull this strap through like that, and then we'll come around from the outside towards the inside of the bag. We're going to pull that through. I'm pulling it through about the same distance as the other side. So I've got that about 1 inch. And I'm going to make that about 1 inch there. And to add a clip just to hold that while I go and get ready to set a rivet in there. Now you can eyeball this or you can measure it, that's up to you. I'm just going to eyeball it. Like that. Oops. Like that. Now grab the set apart. Set that in the cradle. And there we go. We now have our strap attached to our bag. And all we need to do now is a little bit of pressing. So we'll use a pressing ham. So there you have it, the quick no-zip crossbody bag. So if you like the look of this bag and you've watched the tutorial and you thought, yeah, I can whip those up really fast too, why not pop over to my website shop, grab the pattern and then come back and sew along with me. You can find the pattern at www.chriswdesigns.com and www.chriswdesigns.com.au for the Aussies. So they're in AUD, make it easy. Now, if you've been watching along at all, you know that I sewed this bag on my vintage Janome, which I picked up at Marketplace, cheap as chips. So if you'd like to find out what I actually think of this machine for making bags, do watch for my next video, because I will talk about that and I will tell you whether it's a win or a fail. Or maybe it's in between. Which one is it? Watch and find out. Catch you later.